So, you know when you reach a certain age and you can't really keep things in your parents' basement anymore? Well, I reached that age like a decade ago, and much more recently my father moved and I was ordered to triage, to go through some of the family memorabilia and decide which of the items were most meaningful to me and which ones I was willing to part with because nobody would have room to store everything anymore. So I'm rummaging through the stuff and I stumble upon these recipe cards, white index cards with a light green border and a recipe handwritten by my mom on each one. These were going straight into the keep pile. First of all, I was very excited about recreating her banana bread, but also there was something about looking at her writing. Seeing that large bubbly capital B in banana and bread really evoked memories of her and brought her spirit into the storage space some 8.5 years after her death. Now, I probably think about handwriting more than most people because it's a big part of my job. I'm a soferet stam, a scribe, which means that I copy the sacred texts by hand. A few years ago, I was part of a group of female scribes who together wrote a Torah scroll, and when we gathered together for the completion ceremony and to sew the pieces of parchment together, we were very fascinated by the shifts between the books. Not the narrative shifts, the handwriting shifts. Going from Shoshana's rhythmic style to my boxier letters when we moved from Genesis to Exodus. And what's interesting about this is that many of us had learned how to write from the very same teachers. But even if we wanted to precisely replicate our teacher's writing, we wouldn't be able to. It's our handwriting, and it's unique to us. Just like everyone has a different fingerprint, everyone has different handwriting, which is probably why no matter how hard I tried to get my mother's signature down, I never got out of math homework. But you may have noticed, though, that handwriting is a dying art. We read printed books or on a Kindle, and we communicate largely through text and emails. A Torah is, for many of us in this digital day and age, one of the only objects we encounter that is written by hand. So why do we write it by hand? Why do Torahs lag behind the rest of the mechanized world? The first Torah I wrote was written as part of an exhibit on display at the Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco. And sometime later, I was informed that a similar exhibit was being shown at the Jewish Museum in Berlin. But there, a scribe was not writing the Torah, a robot was writing it. Friends posted pictures of the robot on my Facebook page, alarmed, which I'm not sure why, it's not like their jobs were in jeopardy. But I also had this initial knee-jerk response of alarm, but then I thought about it for a minute. It took me 1.5 years to write that Torah at the museum. It took the Berlin robot just 3 months. It actually wrote at the same pace as a person, but it didn't need to sleep or eat lunch or take bathroom breaks, and it never had a bad day. Speed is not the only advantage. A robot would also cost a lot less money. There's still the cost of parchment, but once we invest in the initial programming of the robot, and clearly somebody already has, the big cost of making a new Torah, paying a scribe for the work he does over the course of 1 year or more is eliminated, allowing for more communities to have Torahs. And the text? It would be 100% accurate 100% of the time. I cannot claim nearly that rate of success, but nor can the other human scribes I know. Our Torahs must be proofread and the mistakes corrected, because each and every letter of the Torah is considered important in and of itself. So let's say we had a resh whose roof was too short, making it look like a wide vav. Even if we know what that letter is supposed to be from the context of the word, still, the entire Torah is invalid for ritual use until that letter is fixed. So you see the dilemma. On the one side, we have textual accuracy, speed, efficiency, and access. And on the other side, we have me and a handful of other scribes that would have to find alternative employment. So it is curious that we have not gone in the direction of a machine-made Torah. And we've had some time to go in that direction as the possibility really first presented itself with the advent of the printing press back in the 15th century. Clearly, some other value is at play here that somehow outweighs or mitigates all of these other values combined. So what is it? It must be something that a person can do that a machine cannot do, and this category is rapidly diminishing. People do still excel at language and abstract thought, but the language of the Torah is already set, and copying its words does not require abstract thinking. In fact, it falls pretty squarely into the category of repetitive tasks that computers are taking over in all other realms. So what is it? When I looked at the halachic responses to the question of a Torah made on the press, I saw that one element kept coming up again and again in its various manifestations of the writing process. And that element is kavana. A Torah must be written with awareness that one is writing a Torah. Each and every letter must be written intentionally, which means that an accidental ink spill that happens to magically land in the form of an aleph would be pretty amazing, but not kosher. The scribe is also expected to know Hebrew, not merely be copying characters that are meaningless to her. She also directs her mind towards the greater task of making a Torah. She makes a statement of intention out loud at the beginning, saying, I am writing for the sake of the sanctity of the Torah. Hareini ani kotevet l'shem kedushat sefer Torah. She makes a similar statement of intention before writing any one of God's 10 names, sanctifying them. Writing a Torah is really, really hard. Learning how to form the letters, that was hard at the beginning. Learning how to cut the quill, that was hard for a little bit longer. But the really hard work is putting my butt in the chair day in and day out and focusing on the task of transcribing letters one after the other. And the reason that it's so hard is that I actually can't go on automaton. I have to be there for the experience. Sacred writing requires my attention and all of my sense organs are engaged. My hand is gripping the quill, forming the letters. My eyes are looking at the piece of parchment, at the etched score lines that keep the words straight. My mouth speaks every word of Torah before I write it. My ears hear those words and reduce other noise to the background. Even my nose is involved, especially if I'm writing on goat parchment. All of this is kavana. A Sefer Torah is more than just ink on parchment. It's a sacred vessel for our sacred text. The writer and early Zionist thinker Ahad Ha'am, in an essay from 1891, speaks to the difference between the sacred and the profane. The profane, he says, is when an object is used as a means towards an end, and when the end is no longer relevant, the object loses its meaning as well. The sacred, on the other hand, is when the end invests the object with meaning, wherein the object remains sacred even when used towards a different end. A Sefer Torah is not just a way to keep a record of the text or a way to chant the text in synagogues. We have much more practical ways of doing that at this point, as any bar bat mitzvah student will remind you. A Sefer Torah is sacred because our relationship with its content has been invested into the scroll itself. And we honor and deepen the sanctity by committing resources and time and effort and energy and intention into making each and every one. A robot can't honor or deepen this sanctity because it has no relationship with the text. It has no awareness of what it's writing or that it's taking part in a long-standing tradition. No spirit is imbued into the text because there is no spirit to be imbued. It produces cookie-cutter scrolls. Every gimel looks like all the other gimels, and there's exactly the same amount of space between each letter and between each word, whereas every Torah made by a person is unique, just as every human is unique. My mom's recipe cards are sacred to me, only in part because they contain the secret for the best banana bread ever. If I had to choose between a very personal and heartfelt email from my mom and her recipe card for banana bread, I would choose the recipe card, in part because I get to engage in something that she engaged in and add my own little twist, like walnuts or extra butter, and in part because the card, the physical object itself, is alive in a way that the email isn't. It pulses with her energy and helps me feel connected to her. Now, I recognize that very few of us will have the experience of looking at a Sefer Torah and getting all emotional because our mom wrote it. But a Sefer Torah can elicit a similar response. When I look at a Torah, not knowing who wrote it, I feel anchored, connected to the people who came before me and the people who will come after me who wrestled with the very same questions that I wrestle with through the very same lens. I'm reminded that I'm not alone, but a link in a chain. I think of the Torah as an heirloom that we pass down from generation to generation. It gathers meaning and sanctity every time it is written anew because it gets infused and layered with walnuts and butter and that particular irreplaceable moment in time in which it's penned. It's a sacred communal heirloom, the way that that recipe card is a sacred personal heirloom. And if I were faced again with limited storage space, it's an heirloom I would choose to keep. Thank you.